Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. The goal of The Agent Investor is to help individuals who are involved in the commercial and multifamily space make informed decisions through conversations with individuals who are involved in commercial and multifamily real estate. Today, we have a friend of mine, Austin Bernaiche of Bernaiche Public Insurance Adjusters, joining us. Austin, how you doing?
Good, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
As you heard, the topic of today is going to be, public insurance adjusters and what they do and the nitty gritty and all that good stuff. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. Austin, tell us about yourself, your background, and how you're involved in commercial real estate.
I went to college, studied facilities planning and management, and immediately started working for a restoration company out of Boston. Kind of learned the insurance side of things and kept going with that, but I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't, for me, but I did see an upside kind of in different areas of the industry. So, many years go by, I've done some other jobs here and there, and then ultimately settled into estimating for property losses for other PAs, public adjusters, as well as, contractors in the greater Boston area. And then that kind of blossomed into me getting my license up in Mass and then getting the licenses surrounding that state to kind of help people with their claims start to finish or, negotiate a little better settlement on something that's a little aging.
All right, so let's kick it off. For those who might be familiar, what exactly does a public adjuster do, and how does that differ you from an insurance broker or others involved in the insurance field?
Yeah, so a public adjuster essentially works for the consumer. We're somewhat of a consumer protection type profession. We don't work for the insurance company. So there's independent adjusters, field adjusters, desk adjusters. They all work for the carrier and they have their best interests in mind, where, the consumer oftentimes will deal with restoration companies or, contractors, but they don't really have someone that can dive in and really read their policy, see what it contains, and negotiate a better settlement, document stuff, so that they're better off having someone in their corner versus just taking the word of the carrier.
To dig a little deeper into that, just so the audience understands it thoroughly, with insurance claims, how are you involved?
Yeah, so, we're able to, I tell people all the time, if you have a fire, call 911 and then call me. From the beginning, we can document, we do our sketches, we do, takeoffs on estimating for repairs. We're documenting contents, we're doing contents inventories. If there's damaged contents, we can draw up, documentation for ALE, which is, additional living expenses or loss of use. That's more on the residential side. The commercial side, same stuff. It's, you've got loss of revenues. If you have product and inventory that's damaged, you're going to have to write that up. So there's a really broad spectrum of what we can do to help people on both the business, commercial real estate, as well as, residential homes from start to finish. The earlier we get involved, the cleaner the file is, the easier things get processed through, you get paid quicker. And there's a lot of that less headache on the consumer side because you're not dealing with the insurance directly. We have fiduciary duty, so we communicate directly with the insurance adjusters, the independent adjusters that they might be sending out, or, anyone from the insurance carrier side, whether it's engineers or expert, roofers, stuff like that.
Got it. So to keep it simple is, you're a professional who steps in and becomes a middleman between the owner and the insurance company, and you help facilitate, make sure they're doing things correctly, and really maximize the return on their claim versus them doing it themselves and potentially missing out on money that they just didn't realize they could get.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
kind of accurate? Yeah.
We see a lot on the small claims. They're just undervalued. But also on the bigger claims, larger claims, multi-million-dollar claims, or, multi-six-figure, there's a lot more room for them to kind of underpay, but you might not notice because you're dealing with a lot more, if you're dealing with a $500,000 loss and they're underpaying you 50 grand, you might not notice it. So being able to pick up on where that is, where that should be, as far as if it's plaster or drywall, there's certain things to look out for and kind of, argue at a later date.
Got it. Oh, very good. Next question, we're going to keep it rolling. Can you walk us through a typical claim from the moment damage occurs to the final payout? What does that timeline look like and what does that process look like?
Yeah, so it really depends on the type of claim. Are you displaced? Are you able to, live in the home or operate your business out of wherever it is? So your first step is, like most insurance policies, they're going to say duties after a loss. So you got to notify your insurance, prevent any further damage, and then, help the insurance, not necessarily help, but be receptive to their investigation and allow them to view the property, view the damage contents or whatever, you're claiming. Because at the end of the day, an insurance claim is a request for payment. So I try to get people to learn that we're an option, not just me, but as a profession, from the beginning. And like I said earlier, if you have a fire, call 911, but then call me, because then we can get in, we can document everything properly, we can start our takeoffs for repairs. We have networks of vetted contractors that we deal with on the mitigation side that can come in and help you clean up a mess, get things dried out if it's water, or get a tarp on the roof if it's something wind related. So we really have everything you need from start to finish. We can help file the claim. And then we start that dialogue with the insurance of, this is the loss, this is what happened. I think a lot of people get themselves into, a precarious situation when they're initially filing a claim. There are buzzwords with, whoever's taking that phone call on the other side, and it's all getting written down. All the calls are recorded. So just to make sure you have your facts straight, when the loss happened, stuff like that. And then we carry it through. We start our initial negotiations. We do walkthroughs with the adjusters, any experts that they might want to bring in. Sometimes there's cause and origin for fires. Those people kind of go around and they investigate to try and figure out what the cause of the loss was, whether it's candles or something else electrical related, an appliance. So that process goes through, and then, we get usually an undisputed amount that, this is what we're paying up front, and then we kind of have to fight for the rest. And then all the way through closeout where, reconstruction, they're going to hold back potentially depreciation to make sure you're actually doing the work. And then, we recover that once you've spent the money that they've, given you up front. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of, this is what things cost, this is, the contents, this is the ALE, lost revenues. We know pretty much their CPAs or, financial accountants that handle that type of, loss, that they're going to be able to look at the books, look at your financials, forecast what you've lost, so that you can, if your insurance policy has it, recover, that, as well as potentially moving to another space or renting another space while your business is down.
So a lot of complexity to what you guys do. And I guess the challenge with most people don't realize is they're probably going to experience a loss maybe only once, a couple of times, or almost never. So it's one of those things they may not have ever had any experience in the last 20 years, and all of a sudden there's a major loss. And now they're scrambling to do it on their own and not realizing. And I'm assuming a lot of business owners and investors, they end up just settling with what was offered to them in the end, and they just say, yes, that's fine. And then they don't realize they could have, made, not made, but, got more at 30% more in their claim if they would have worked with someone like yourself. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, potentially. It's you have a lot going on as an owner, as a homeowner as well. And it's just one more thing that you're either going to have time to do, or you're going to kind of, not take the easy way out, but try to move it along as quickly as possible while potentially leaving, some meat on the bone. So kind of having someone like me step in and kind of run things, it alleviates some of your stress while you're still focused on the day-to-day of, okay, I may have tenants that I need to relocate, or, help them relocate, or I've got business, I've got product that I need to now reorder or, get claimed. So there's a lot going. Depends on the business too, A laundromat fire is going to be different than, an office building.
And this kind of ties right into the next question. At what point should someone, consider working with the public adjuster? Immediately after the loss, before the loss, when is the best time?
I usually say it depends on the carrier, but I think as early as possible. Your file needs to be well documented. You want to have as much evidence on your side to go back to. If, let's say, you have a fire, we use Matterport, which is a 3D scanner. It goes in, takes pictures, you can walk through and see everything. So if you're going back and forth with an adjuster or someone, and they're, saying this wasn't there, or, this was in granite, this was something else, then you can say, look, here it is, here's the picture. So as early as we can get in, the better, before demo starts. That way we can document the as built or current conditions, pre-loss conditions, to kind of make sure that we're accounting for everything. We tend to get involved later on when people start Googling, what to do. They're not getting, the attention they need, or they're not getting, the number that they feel is accurate based on, contractor quotes that they're shopping around for. So there's a wide spectrum, but I believe that the earlier we get involved, the better. Even if people just want to call and ask questions, my phone's always on.
And if I were to guess, most owners and investors, they're probably calling you after they already started the claim, because I'd imagine most of them don't have enough experience to potentially reach out to say, hey, I'm going to call and file a claim soon.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do?
Yeah, and we can file it for you. We sign a contract with you that allows us to represent you with your carrier. It authorizes us to work on your behalf, communicate with them, schedule stuff. So the earlier we do that, the less of, the game playing you hopefully should experience.
The next question I have is, how do you guys get paid? I'm pretty sure that's a big question of question marks that people have in their head. How much do you cost? I know it probably varies, but generally, what does it look like in terms of fee structure?
Yeah, so we're a pretty regulated industry. It varies state by state, but Connecticut, for example, we're capped at 10% of the loss. So that's on what we recover. Let's say someone brings me in 5 months later, I'm able to get them, another 20 grand, then that 20 grand is what that percentage would attach to. If I get it at the beginning, yes, it's a little higher, but we can also work with that percentage to kind of make it so that it's not, as big of a pill to swallow at the end. Like I said, it's, we don't get paid till you get paid. So, some of these larger losses that take 6 months to a year to even get to, a point of receiving a substantial amount of, the funds you need, we're not getting paid. So we're working for free until, we get paid. So the percentage, it depends, on the loss, maybe the complexity, maybe the size. So, it's all negotiable, and, we like to be obviously in the 10% side of things, but we're willing to work with people and kind of make sure that, at the end of the day, we enjoy helping people. We're in it to make money, but we're not, it's not all about the money. It's to make sure that the consumer is taken care of and represented how they should be.
Yeah, and I, from personal experience, I've used a public adjuster. Fortunately, I had a good referral a few years back on a multifamily that I owned, and it was, some pretty significant roof damage. And I didn't know any better. I just started calling around and said, hey, before I file this claim, I feel like there's somebody who could help, because I'm kind of a who, not how kind of guy, where I'd rather, instead of me trying to figure out and doing it myself, I try to figure out who's the professional that can help with it. And luckily, I got linked up with an individual, and it was the same deal. The structure was 10%, but it was well worth it, because they got me more than I probably would have got on my own. And I really didn't have to do anything other than just maybe, respond to a couple of emails and a few phone calls, but nothing more than that. And that was it. And they got paid out the end, and I'm very happy with what would happen. So from my standpoint, I highly recommend having a public insurance adjuster in your back pocket, if not now, in the future, or for referral for other clients if you're in the commercial multifamily space. The audience has a pretty good picture on like what you guys do. I think it's a very straightforward service. I mean, obviously there's some complexities behind it, but that's the stuff that you guys handle. But in terms of just the fundamentals of it, something goes down, give you guys a call as soon as possible to kind of get you in the beginning, and then just let you guys run with it after you have the agreement in place. And you just try to maximize their return on their claim in the end.
Yeah.
And all is good. So very good. All right, so we're pretty much done with all the professional questions, but we're going to dive into a little bit of your personal life for a quick sec. So when you're not helping people maximize their claims in your public adjustment space, what do you enjoy doing in life? What brings you joy?
Yeah, it depends on the season, but I like to spend a lot of time outside. I go skiing in the winter, hiking, all seasons, riding my bikes. I do road biking and mountain biking. I started skydiving a few years ago, but have yet to, get to my A license. You find you don't have a lot of time when you're building a business, so that's been on the back burner, but something I'd like to get back into, and just traveling around. I'm never tired of going for a drive, and being licensed in 8 states, it gives me an option to, drive down, check out some losses, or, help people out. So traveling around and getting to see the beautiful country that we have.
Yeah, so you dabble back in the claim space. You mentioned licensed in multiple states. In terms of the Northeast, like what areas in the Northeast are you licensed in that, just so the audience knows?
Yeah, licensed in Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maine.
Nice. Very good. All right, that's good to know. Next is, how can people find you? How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, if you go on Google and you Google Naiche Public Adjuster, going to be the first one that comes up. We're on Instagram. It might be Naiche Inc. And then, our phone numbers are all over the place.
And I'll make sure I put your info in the post once we get it all online and whatnot. And last question: any final words you have for the audience before we take off?
Well, when you call, you get me. We're not at the level where you're talking to a machine or AI or anything. And one thing that I'm seeing a lot with a lot of losses is make sure you have enough insurance. Price is a big thing. A lot of people will shop because of the price, but you got to make sure that you have enough insurance to cover, the worst. If your unit or, property burns down and, it doesn't account for inflation, there's, tons of endorsements on the policies. You just want to make sure that you're insured at the right level, if not more, because things are getting more expensive. Building materials, a lot of these older buildings in the Northeast have plaster. That's a big number item. So it's, one of those things where you take into account, you got the hardwood casings, stuff like that adds up quickly, and you eat your coverage pretty quickly after a significant loss. So just make sure you have enough insurance. Hopefully you don't have
Mm.
any need to use it, but you don't want to be underinsured and have to be coming out of pocket or taking a loan to fix your property.
Very, very good tip. I didn't even think about that. And definitely, I know at least in our area of the Northeast, many of the investors, and so they definitely underinsure their properties out of the sake of just to save a few bucks, not realizing that it could be detrimental in the end when they need a claim and it just doesn't cover it. But very good tip there. So, all right, with that said, that's it, folks. So thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. Austin, thank you so much for joining us. Great insights. And I hope, people give you a call at some point in the future when they need help in the public adjustment space. And to our audience, thank you all for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. We want to wish you all the best in your health and happiness. Thank you all. We'll catch you on the next one.